Hey. Welcome to episode 152 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I have to say, I love that my podcast is older than I am. It's a good thing. Today, I'm talking to a college friend about a wide variety of things because he has so many interests. And some of it'll be really just what we think of as layer stuff like baseball and radio trivia, and some of it'll be issues we more struggle with as a country, like bipartisanship. But I know it's an important discussion, so I'm excited to bring it to you. But first, this.
Today's guest, Dan Ahlers.
Welcome back to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Let me tell you a little bit more about Dan Ahlers. Dan Ahlers has lived most of his life in a smaller town. I say smaller because Dell Rapids, where Dan is from, has a population of 3,996, according to Wiki. Well, some towns in South Dakota have less than 100 residents. One of Dan's core values is giving back to the community. In addition to being a small business owner, for the past 20 years, he has served as the president of Haven Before and After School Program, the Dell Rapids Chamber of Commerce, and the Dell Rapids Community Fund. He also served as State Legislator for 6 years, ensuring the state government worked efficiently and provided services that met the needs of the Dell Rapids community. He has 2 boys and is married to his high school sweetheart. Please help me welcome Dan Ahlers. Good morning, Dan.
Morning, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am super. It's another beautiful morning, great weather, a lot of sunshine, so looks to be a good day.
Yeah, we are lucky. Thanks for being on the show, my friend. One of the I knew you in college casually, but then suddenly you're talking to the campus about opening a coffee shop that used to be on campus, but then disappeared, and I'm like, wow, I didn't even know the coffee shop existed, and here my friend is thinking about opening it. Where do you get the drive to want to create new things like that, or resurrect old things in this case?
Well, I really love history. It's a hobby of mine, and when you're at a place, when you're at a college, you want to learn a little bit about it, the background, and some of the neat things that uh, that make it such a special place. And I lived in East Hall, which was one of the oldest buildings on campus, and I discovered this place. It's like almost an underground uh, building behind East Hall, and I discovered that there used to be a coffee house slash night spot on campus called the Jabberwock. And I'm like, wouldn't that be great for the students to have a place like that to go again? And I went through the process of finding out why it closed, what it would take to get it back open. And that's what really pushed me to really get kind of a campus movement going. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful. I licensed the Jabberwock name and opened my own coffee shop. So, in the spirit of the one on campus.
I forget that that you opened the. I mean, I knew you had a coffee shop, but you forgot that it was named the Jabberwock. Is that the first thing you did out of college?
No, actually, I looked at some jobs in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, the pay was a lot less than what I was making working at Menards. So, a couple of years out of college, I continued to work at Menards and was horsing around with some friends one night doing a scene from a movie. And they were like, you should really own your own video store. And I said, that's not a bad idea. So I started looking into what it would take to open a video store. And, keep in mind, Netflix already existed at this point. So I ran into a lot of people telling me that this wasn't going to work, that you could make it happen. And that probably made me a little more determined to prove them wrong. And a few months later, I opened up my first business. It was Video Plus in Dell Rapids. I had 3 of those stores at one point and about 8 satellite locations in smaller towns. And
What? Wow.
yeah. And I owned all those till my grandmother became ill, and then I sold off everything except the Dell store. And I owned that store for 20 years. I closed it in 2019.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, this is going to be a very easy conversation. There's so much to unpack and what you just said. First of all, for the people watching around the country, what is Menards?
Menards is a lumber yard, like a Home Depot or Lowe's. It was a little more regionally based than mostly in the Midwest, but it's a pretty large company today.
And then you said you and your friends were creating a scene from a movie. Please explain that a little more. My friends and I just haven't yet created a scene from a movie. It sounds cool.
Well, earlier in the evening, we were having a discussion about what we wanted to do. We all had college degrees, and Menards was paying us better than what we could get in our fields, and we were just a little unhappy with where we were at, and wanted to really put our degrees to work. And then we decided to relax, and we were watching a movie, and we like comedies, a lot of silly movies, and we were watching a Mike Myers movie called So I Married an Axe Murderer. And there's a scene in the movie where Mike Myers also plays he plays his dad in the movie, and he goes off on this rant. And so I stood up and I started doing the rant in sync with Mike Myers, using the voice, and everybody started laughing, and they said, that's really what you need to do. You should do something with movies, own your own video store. And a little bit of a joke started a career for 20 years.
It's amazing that whole life can take us on a different path very suddenly. So, So what was it like starting a video store in a video stores in a bunch of small towns as Netflix was coming on the scene?
You know, Netflix really didn't present the competition that one might think. Uh, you know, the one thing I've learned in business that the internet will never be able to compete with is good customer service.
Mm,
Coming into a store, you
mm,
can create an atmosphere. So it comes
mm.
down to what do you want that to be? And I love visiting with people. I love hearing what interests them, and I love helping them find whatever meets their needs. Whether it was working at Menards, making sure they got the right product for their project, or the video store, coming in and finding out, what do you really want to do on a Friday evening? What is going to make your evening spectacular? How can I help make that happen? And uh, you know that just creates an environment where people want to be and hang out. I always think of the old TV show Cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and
Yeah.
uh, nothing's better than walking into a small business and people, say, "Hey, Dan, how's it going? Great to see you." And that's the kind of environment and atmosphere we try to create at Video Plus, and it served us well for 2 decades.
So, so when you created one video, so you proved people wrong who were kind of naysayers. What led you to? Did you say you had eight satellite locations?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I opened up
what led you
multiple
to
stores.
expand, I guess?
Well, I have a bit of a hoarding problem, so I always kept extra copies of my movies. And then you start to amass quite a bit of a collection sitting there. Uh, there were other opportunities. People we have a store closing. Uh, Many people in South Dakota will know Jeff Logan. He's the owner of Logan Luxury Theaters and the Drive-In in Mitchell. He owned our theater in Dell Rapids, and he owned the State Theater in Huron. He was the head of NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, and we developed a
NATO.
friendship. Yeah, NATO. I know it's great. He always liked to say he was the president of NATO. That would always throw people off. But I mean, he was a really great mentor. He used to own some video stores. He had some extra shelving. The price was right, and when you expand, if you do it right, sometimes it can really up your revenues and allow you to reduce your costs. So I did that, and I'll tell you, the best day was the day I opened the tea store. And one of my first customers was from the Small Business Association, the SBA, who had told me that my business plan would never work. And he signed up as a customer. And I said, not too bad for something that would never work, right? He goes, I was wrong. And I said, that was a great feeling.
That's wonderful. Uh, along with the video story, you interviewed a lot of people to be employees, and when we talked last, we immediately got on the subject of what advice would you give someone who experiences a disability about applying for a job?
Well, that's a great question. I've worked and done a few seminars on this for different groups, and what I've always told people: don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what your strengths are. Uh, when you interview with me, I want to know what you're passionate about. I want to know what your likes are. I want to know how you think you can make my business better or contribute to my business and be part of a team. So the rest of that stuff is really immaterial, and small, and we can work around those things. There's always plenty to do in a business and in a company, large or small. So people need to focus on what they can, their cans, and not their can'ts.
So, 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 so you wouldn't want me to come in for an interview, you shake your hand and say hi, and say, hey, I'm Jason Freeman. I have a speech impediment and coordination differences.
No, no. That doesn't matter to me. I want to hear about where you see yourself fitting into my business. Um, Speech impediments, mobility issues. I had many, or I should say, several people that worked for me over the years with cerebral palsy, or had brittle bone disease, different things that limited certain things they could do, but it didn't limit their ability to provide great service. It didn't limit their ability to interact with customers. And people came in because of the family atmosphere where everybody's welcome and felt like they belonged. I mean, that's part of being a member of the community. That's part of being that's part of being a good business owner, is that it's a place for everyone.
I want people really to hear this. You said the disabilities didn't really matter to you. They could be accommodated. What mattered is how people could contribute and be part of a team. So often as humans have, when we have a disability, or even when we don't, we get so stuck in our heads and think other people must be so turned off by my weakness, or they will avoid me because of my weakness. But but so often our weaknesses are not what other people are interested in. What would you say to go along with that?
Well, I think that's very true, and like the title of your show, the awkwardly awesome. Uh, I think there's a certain amount of uncomfortableness that is shared on both sides, and it comes down to being able to break down those barriers.
Mm.
And we just have to be willing to set those things that make us uncomfortable a little bit, or things that we might be self-conscious of, aside, and be able to sit down and have the conversation, to be able to see past those things, to find out who people truly are. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I still run into situations that make me a little uncomfortable, but I have to remind myself that, or I'll do something silly that I'm like, oh, they must think I'm totally rude, or I didn't realize or see something right away and notice it. But we're all human, right? We make mistakes, and it's how we move forward, and how we, our effort to really include folks and be willing to listen, that's important.
Speaking of moving forward, having a small business, having a video store, it sounds easy in retrospect as you talk about it. Oh, I had one store and I grew and it lasted and I had employees. But in having a small business, I imagine, oh, I know because I have one. It requires endurance. Endurance. What what did playing sports teach you about having endurance?
Well, that's a great question, because I was a long distance runner, and that can certainly be a mental game, right? Yeah, you have to tell yourself that there are mile markers and goals that you reach. And then things, get just a little bit easier. You just have to keep plugging along, especially, when you're tired and you feel like you just want to give up. You got to go, I just got 1 mile left. You got to tell yourself, hey, that next stop is just over the horizon, or that next goal is just over the horizon. And it's a mental game. You got to push yourself. There are some days where it feels great and you're coasting and it's going well. And a day or two later, it can feel like the world's coming down and you're like, why did I ever do this? But I think all in all, I said, if you keep a positive mindset, if you're willing to put in the time and the work, it's a very rewarding experience.
What do you do in those moments when it feels like the world is coming down in a business or in a political campaign to keep going instead of just saying, oh, this idea didn't work, next?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that people shouldn't react in the moment. When you're really feeling overwhelmed, that's a time where you just need to find your own space, a quiet space, uh, your bedroom, wherever it may be, and just take a moment to breathe
Hmm.
and really try and relax, and then go back and maybe it's making a list, just kind of write things down, uh, so that you can look at the situation in an objective manner and say, here's where I'm at, where do I want to be, and then you can develop a roadmap to get there. Uh, there were certainly days as a business owner, as a legislator, where you get really frustrated with what's happened and you want to pull your hair out, you want to scream, you just want to go somewhere and just, you're like, you want to do that. But being able to maintain a certain calmness and objectivity reminds you that there's a bigger picture out there. This is just a stumbling block on the path to that goal that you originally set. And you said, if you can not react in that moment, and you can sit down, relax, and then revisit your overall plan and your goal, you can work yourself through those tough times.
When you say take some time to breathe, is there any specific way you breathe during those times?
It's just one of those moments where you have to shut all the noise off, and maybe you have some light listening music that works for you, and you just close your eyes and you breathe. They don't have to be deep breaths. You just need to relax, whatever it takes for you to be relax in that moment, and just calm yourself so that you can settle down. That blood pressure comes down a little bit. The anger or the frustration subsides, and then you can just think clearly. Your moment of Zen, as they might call it, it's nothing too scientific. I don't have a mantra or anything. I kind of go in a room. I can shut off the lights, lean back in a chair, relax, and just take a few deep breaths.
What you're saying is so important, and it can be very challenging to do, because when the overwhelm is flowing, when the anger is flowing, we just want to act and act fast and keep acting, but that can really take us in a direction that we really do not want to go.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of times you end up regretting those moments that you lose control, and you have to apologize, or hopefully you apologize if you offended or hurt anybody's feelings. And it happens to all of us. You're working to try and minimize those situations, and you have a plan for what you're going to do when those types of situations arise. And it's difficult. Like I said, we're all human. We make mistakes. We lose control. But I found this to be pretty successful. It has allowed me to avoid a lot of situations where in the past, in my youth, I might have reacted differently.
Along with this, sometimes in life, we don't win, whether it's in baseball or like you mentioned, or we talked about the Jabberwock on campus at the beginning, and ultimately that wasn't a winning thing. So a few years ago, you ran for U.S. Senate as an underdog. What inspired you to put yourself in that situation? And you knew it would be so much work, and you knew that would probably be a good chance that the result wouldn't be in your favor. What inspired you to do that?
What I've seen in politics over the years is people really unsatisfied with their candidates or the people that are running, but then people don't step up. And that's why we get the leadership that we get. That's why we see some of the messes and just the people generally unsatisfied with government. And I wouldn't have run if I didn't think I could do a better job. And I certainly had the experience from being in the state legislature. So, when you're telling your kids, they'll ask why, they'll see things on TV, they'll ask why people are behaving the way they are. And you tell them, that people need to step up, show up. Well, sometimes you got to put your money where your mouth is. And that means that you need to step up and show up. And it wasn't a hard decision for me. Certainly, it was a tougher decision for my family because my choice to run a statewide campaign, on the national level, that affects your family too, or it can, and sometimes politics can get ugly. But it was an easy choice for me because I knew that we needed something better. I trusted my abilities to work across party lines, and that was going to be an asset. And I knew it was going to be a lot of work. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. COVID threw a whole new wrinkle into it, and it made things really interesting. And that was a struggle for me because that worked against my strengths. What I've always felt my biggest strength is that ability to go out and meet people and knock doors and have those face-to-face conversations. And COVID meant that wasn't going to be possible. So then you have to get creative and find new ways of doing it. And even in the loss, people shouldn't be afraid of the loss. Losses are opportunities to learn and to reflect. And those losses aren't personal either. It's most of these people don't know who you are. They see a party label, and they may base their decision solely on that. And that might be a failure on my part to reach more people. So there's always things that can be learned, and you have to be willing to take those risks. And sometimes they work out, and sometimes they don't. But in every loss, there's a chance to learn new things.
So first of all, I think about myself. I'm watch a lot of news, and I'm very good at sitting back in the bleachers and having a commentary about what's going on and what I I think should go on. But then when I think about running for political office, I'm like I'm to myself repeatedly. I'm like, no way, I would never do that. So you're making me realize that I'm complaining and then saying that I'll do nothing about it. I mean, besides vote, which is a little something, I guess.
I think that's a lot of some voting is really important. I think uh, people engaging in the process, and it doesn't have to be running for office. There are so many opportunities out there for people to get involved. You know, they can be gathering signatures for a petition for an issue that they're really passionate about. They can be a precinct or county organizer. They can do volunteer work for nonprofits that advocate for issues that they're passionate about. There's so many options and opportunities to get involved, I think there's something for everybody in the process for whatever comfort level they may have. Running for office is just one, and it doesn't have to be a big one. It can be something like school board. You know,
Mm,
I can't think of uh, work that's more noble than trying to work on uh, the education for our children, for our future.
mm,
Sometimes people, look at those things and don't see them as big as running for Congress or running for a state legislature, but they're uh, immeasurably important. And it's just you got to find that spot where what's your passion, what are the things that are important for you, and then you just ask, how can I contribute? There's just so many ways.
This is such a good point. So often in life, we think, oh, I should do the thing. And then we think of doing something that seems insurmountable. And then we go, oh, I can't do that thing. But you're saying there's ways to be politically involved that don't involve doing something that we felt as insurmountable or that would turn our life upside down.
Yeah, you just got to find what fits for you. And um, one of the organizations that I've done a lot of work with, it um, used to be Partners in Policy Making, South Dakota Advocacy. Now it's I think it's Disability South Dakota now. I've done a lot of work with them over the years, and just parents of children with disabilities, individuals with disabilities that learn to be their own advocates, and they go and they're just trying to make sure they get the services that they deserve, that they have a right to, the education. There's all kinds of ways for people to be involved, and some of the best work that I've seen has come from those that have testified on my bills. Had very little to do with me, and it had more to do with the people that showed up to talk and share their story. And they didn't have to do any more than just show up and like you said, share that story with those people sitting behind a desk and saying why is this bill sitting here. So it's just there's just so many different ways that people can be involved and have an impact. So
What
yeah, I don't think people should limit themselves.
what would you we hear about and wait for you saw about people with teaching people with disabilities to advocate for themselves? Very rightfully so. But what would you say to someone listening who doesn't have a disability, who's wondering how they should advocate for themselves in the political space?
Well, I don't think it's any different if someone is passionate about whether they're a farmer and it happens to be eminent domain. Talk to your farmers union. See how you can get involved. Call your local legislator. Take them to your farm. Show them your farm. Show them what is concerning you, and let them know. I mean, yeah, that recipe doesn't change. It's just, what are the things that mean the most to you? If you're a teacher and you see things happening in the school, or you see a policy out there that could be detrimental, speak up. If you don't, those changes happen and without you, and they affect your job and your ability to do your job. And I think that's just it. People think that there has to be something big, and it doesn't have to be. It's about showing up. It's about speaking up and sharing your stories.
You said if we don't speak up, the changes happen without us. It's not like a change. The debate is whether change will happen or not. Change will always happen. But if we don't get involved, the change happens without us. Well, that's
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first issues I had to deal with when I was elected into the legislature back in 2006, there was a there was a change in massage therapy licensure, and massage therapists as a whole, as a state, and their associations really fell asleep on the job, and some changes were made to the licensing based on recommendations from the medical community. And all of a sudden, people are like, "Hey, wait, we weren't part of this conversation." And it's a failure of your elected officials to actually reach out and have a conversation, but it's also a good you know it's a good example of what happens when you don't engage in the process. And they showed up in droves. I remember showing up to Pier, and there were a lot of massage therapists hanging out. There were hundreds of them in the Capitol. I'm like, what's going on? And to find out what happened, before I got there, uh, that led to this onslaught of massage therapists. Uh, you know, some of them very angry and telling you that you need to fix this, was a really teachable moment for me, and a good reminder for a new legislator that, hey, when you see legislation like this, and you know it's going to affect somebody that whether it's a chiropractor, a teacher, or whatever, go talk to them, make them aware of what's going on, and then get some feedback. But yeah, certainly people need to be part of that, because if they're not, you can end up in some pretty unhappy situations and impacted your lives, and your livelihood can be impacted in a negative way.
Um, so you're saying legislators should proactively reach out to good when they see legislation coming that affects specific groups. They should proactively reach out to those groups. If
Yeah, absolutely. Um, if you want to be a good legislator, you can't just sit there and wait for people to come to you. You need to go to them too.
mm,
Communication is always a two-way street,
mm,
and you really need to, if you want to do your job well, you have to be informed. And a lot of decisions are made, unfortunately, by people who are very uninformed, or they're just getting their information from limited sources, and listening to what they're being told by party leaders or lobbyists. Uh, but you need to talk to the people that elected you, your constituents, and you need to get their take on things too, especially if you want to be an effective and just a good government comes from communication.
and we'll get back to that in a sec, but but a thing I wanted to go back to for a minute. So you decided to run this marathon of running for U.S. Senate, and then you're set for the marathon. You know it's going to be very hard, but then the challenge of a pandemic and not being able to reach people in person like you like to do came on. I think sometimes when we go for something new, we are ready for we know it's going to be hard. But then when that second, third, or fourth challenge gets layered upon the one we anticipated, we go, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So, do you have any ideas for people when they are going for what they want, but they encounter those extra bonus bonus challenges?
Well, I think it goes back to something we talked about a little earlier when you're having those rough days and you have those moments where you don't want to act in the moment, you want to take a break. But uh, that's where you take a look at that plan again and go, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we're dealing with right now. That's just a blip. This is our ultimate goal. How do we need to reset to get there? And I think if you can look at it objectively and like you said, not react in that moment, uh, you can usually achieve your goal. At least give a good shot at it, anyways. And like I said, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is not a bad thing. I don't even like to use the word failure. Um, I can't think of a better word, but there are things that, like I said, you can learn from those things. You can become a better person. You can become better at what you do um, by learning from from those failures. Um, so when you succeed, you don't think there's anything wrong. You could succeed, and there could have been a lot of things that were wrong. You got lucky. Um, in a state like South Dakota, if you're running as a Republican, you can make a lot of mistakes because there's a lot more voters, right? So that doesn't mean you did it right. It just means you had numbers. So there's success. We don't often reflect on what made it successful and learn. Although I would recommend that people do ask themselves, what did we do right that helped us succeed? What could we have done better? But we tend to do, and in failure, we tend to reflect more on those failures and to just remember that there are things that you can learn from that and to not look at it as a roadblock, but an opportunity.
Wonderful. And emotions get involved too. Like when that blip comes on. It might not just. It might be a blip in the big picture, but at the moment it might feel like an absolute ton of bricks. So how do you? I guess you said to go to the room and relax and then come back to it with a different mindset. But how else do we navigate something when it just feels so painfully emotional?
You, you know there could be a time where you do just need to stop and say, I can't do this anymore. If it affects your health, if it's affecting other things in your life, that may be a time to say stop. there are those moments that you just have to say, is the cost greater than the benefit of doing that? Once again, that gives you that moment to reflect upon why it didn't work, and what other opportunities do I have forward to maybe do something similar, or that would get you towards that goal. It could be reevaluating your goals. I don't think people should push through to the detriment of themselves, either health wise or their financial stability. There's a number of things you don't want to jeopardize, and sometimes that's a reality, and we have to say that I think it's time that I stop. And then it's like, so where am I going forward? What do I do now? And I think we experience those in life. For me, when I knew it was time to close the video store, that wasn't a failure. It was time. There were a lot of factors, and not ones that people would necessarily think. People would think, oh, it was because of the internet and all those other things. We'd actually, in a small town, we'd signed up 131 new customers that last year I was open. That's a lot of new customers in a small town. So, you have a large customer base, good flow, but it started to get difficult to get product. It was getting difficult to hire people and find enough people to work. And there were a lot of other things. And I had to ask, when you're, it's like a farmer who farms and plants corn, but now the seed company doesn't want to sell him seed. Can you really still can you still farm corn, right? Can you, those things get to be complicated. And I just got to a point where I said, it's time. It's time. And it was emotional, certainly difficult. And you had to share that message with people that have been coming in your store for 20 years, that this was going to be it. I still get emotional when I talk about it. So if I get a little choked up, because it was a pretty big deal. But the thing that was most difficult, and I think people experience this at different stages in their life, and I think people experience it when they retire, is like, if I'm not this, then who am I?
If I'm not this, then who am I?
Yeah, for me, I was known as Dan the Movie Man. That's who I was for 20 years. So then, being so interwoven in that community, and part of that community in so many different ways, but you're known as Dan the Movie Man, then and you're associated with that business, and that's how people know you. There's a little bit of an identity crisis. You have to ask, who am I now? What's my purpose? And how do I still find ways to contribute and be part of this community I love so much? So, that's a real struggle. And I think that people go through that at different points in their lives. And maybe you go through it multiple times. I'm thankful that I went through it when I did, because it helped me understand people who are going through that process at a much older age. In my current job now, even working with people who are holding leadership positions, but have held them for a long time, and they know that they need to be done, but they don't know how to be anything else. So certainly going through that as a small business owner, and my life changing, at a relatively young age. Now it helps me better understand and help other people navigate those situations too, and remind them that this is just the closing of a chapter. you have a new chapter to start, and how do you want to write it? What do you want it to be about? And it's just,
Wow.
once again, it's a new opportunity.
Wow. 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 Thanks for put, putting so much context around that always. So often, I mean, we can't walk in anyone's shoes. Like I knew your video stores had closed, but and like Dan's resourceful video stores close, something else happens. It's not that big a deal, but to know it was a big deal, and then and that you didn't just stop that, but you've done all these other things. So it was a big deal, and then you did move on. That both things were true. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing
it's
that.
yeah, no, it was a really profound moment in my life, and like I said, I still get a little emotional when I talk about it, but um, I learned a lot from it, and I developed an understanding that helps me relate to other folks too. So
Mm.
good things.
So Dan, I noticed that even when I get in a political discussion with a friend who has different political views, that often doesn't go well because it becomes so emotional, and neither of us, or at least I don't know as much as I could, and it just kind of devolves and leaves us both feeling not that good. So if politics is so emotional and so intense right now, how do we get back to bipartisanship? How in this country do we get back to solving all the problems that are facing us together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A really good question, and I think that uh, my success as a legislator, certainly working in the minority, came from that ability to cross party lines. And I think there are a couple things that happen. One, when people get into conversations with someone with different views, they're trying to change them in
Hmm.
some way and trying to impose their will or their ideas on someone else. And I think when you engage in a conversation with someone, you have to be able to uh, accept the fact that you may not change their mind.
Hmm.
Um, but
When
it's
you
about
engage
sharing.
in a conversation with someone, you have to be able to accept the fact that you might not change their mind.
Yeah, and you just want to listen to what they have to say, and then you want to share how you feel on it. And sometimes that means you develop an understanding and an appreciation for one another, and you don't necessarily agree, but you build respect. And it's all about, for me as a legislator, it was all about building trust too. You want to be able to build trust. And I did that by being an open book. I sat on the appropriations committee, and that I love that committee. It's where all the action is. It's very intense. It's all about the money and where the dollars flow. But it's difficult, it's intimidating, and often misunderstood. And one of the things that the Appropriations Committee would do is they would hold that information and keep it close to the vest and not share it because they didn't want people who didn't understand it per se to get carried away with it. Well, for my Republican colleagues, they're members of the Appropriations Committee not sharing that information. made them suspicious, made them distrustful. And a lot of times when I would hear them have these folks that were having, you know, questions about the financial stuff, I would just go to them and say, "Well, here, let me share with you what's going on," and I would try to put it in a way that I knew that they would understand, that summarized what was going on, and would answer some of their questions, concerns that they might have. And when you do that, you build trust. And I would say 7 out of 10 times we weren't going to agree on a lot of different things, especially on social issues and stuff like that. But I always had their ear, and we could always sit down and have a conversation. I remember we wanted to get an increase for TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families. It's food assistance, food security. And we wanted a very small increase, like a 2% increase is what we were talking about. And it just didn't look like it was going to happen. And I remember Feeding South Dakota, one of their representatives said, "Dan, we're going to do a tour for the Appropriations Committee." And they said, what Republicans would you recommend bringing in? And I gave them a list of the names that I knew of people who would be supportive. And then I had a couple others that I knew we needed more votes. And I said, this is where I think we could get them. And they're like, really? This person? And I'm like, I said, invite them and let's see what happens. So they did. And I walked with them on, I walked with them on the tour and experienced it with them. And we talked a little bit as we went through. We talked about some of the hurdles that might need to be overcome. And at the end of it, this particular individual looked at me and said, "How can we get this done, Dan? How are we going to get this done?" So someone who was written off as not being an advocate or someone that could be relied on as an ally, after one tour was saying, "How do we get this done?" So I don't like I said, I don't go in trying to change people, but I go in with an open mind. I try to be listen, and when I can, be accepting of their ideas, or at least acknowledge that they have a different point of view, and then you can find ways to work together. There are always, inside all of those stories about where people are at, there are threads of common ground, and you just have to dig for them and find them. And those are the things that you focus on when you're trying to work together.
Oh my gosh. And inside all of the stories we hear when we disagree with anyone, whether it's in politics or in life, the threads of common ground. Wow. What a sentiment. What a thing to look for, I guess.
Yeah, it's important. And I mean, I would say that in the end, that no matter where people are at politically, they want a strong country, they want a good life, and they value personal freedoms. And I think that those things are all in there. The question is, how do we get there? What do they look like? And sometimes those things mean different things to different people. But that's the beauty of a country like ours, where we should be able to have that kind of discourse. I mean, we should be celebrating our differences and our different heritages, our backgrounds, and weeding out the intolerance. The intolerance and the fear are what typically divide us.
Yeah. I could talk to you for another hour or two, and we didn't even get to talk about your amazing success with radio contests, or about baseball, or about your amazing kids, your amazing wife, but this is how conversations go. There's a good conversation doesn't include everything, but it includes a lot of things. Th- thanks so much. Before we go, one final question I ask all my guests. To me, I talk about doing our imperfect best. To me, it means that I have a vision of the best I want for my life, and I want to contribute to the world. And when mistakes happen, when obstacles happen, instead of using those as reasons to stop, I try and learn from those and use them as reasons to move forward. I know we've talked a lot about this concept during this conversation, but concisely, what does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Dan Ahlers?
You know, I think it's kind of our life. You know, like you said, there's this vision of what perfection is, and I don't know that we can ever quite attain it. But part of the thrill for me is trying to get there, and along the way, things don't always work out the way you want them to, um, and they don't look exactly the way you want, but they're beautiful in their own respect, and you have to look at each accomplishment, each failure as what they are, and you just continue to strive even harder. Um, and next time it might turn out just a little bit better.
Well. So good to have you on the show. Thanks much for your time and for all you do for your community and and in all the ways you create conversation and you create understanding. Thanks for being you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Bring me back on show 300 and we'll talk about radio contests and family.
Awesome. Sounds good. In baseball.
And baseball, yes. We talk all kinds of baseball.
Awesome. Thank you. Uh, um, it's I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Or should hope that I hope you. I know I enjoy my conversation with Dan immensely. I hope you got what you needed from the conversation too, and I encourage both you and me the next time we're faced with a conversation with someone and we don't agree on an issue, instead of just getting all uptight and storming off in anger, will really listen to the other person and acknowledge the view and try and find that common thread of humanity, and also state your view quietly and clearly, and try to end the conversation not necessarily with agreement, but building trust in in each other, and being able to disagree if you do, and if you come to agreement, great, that's a bonus. So So thanks for tuning into our Ugly Awesome podcast. Please tune in next Wednesday for another episode with another amazing guest, and I'm off to cough. So talk to you later.